Have you ever lost trust? Not just in someone else, but in yourself? That moment when everything you believed in suddenly breaks, and even learning English feels pointless? I've been there, standing in a cold Danish winter trying to rebuild not only my life but also my confidence, one English word at a time. This video isn't about grammar or rules. It's about how learning to listen again helped me rebuild trust, love, and my voice after the storm. The storm before calm. It started on a rainy Tuesday in Copenhagen. One of those days when the sky feels heavier than your thoughts. I had just realized that the person I trusted most had lied to me. And somehow that betrayal didn't just break my heart. It broke my motivation to do anything, even to practice English, something I used to love. Every word I heard sounded meaningless, every sentence like noise. You know that feeling when your brain refuses to focus no matter how hard you try? That was me. I would open an English podcast, but after 10 seconds I couldn't even remember what I'd heard. My mind was busy replaying that conversation, the one where everything fell apart. I felt useless. Why learn English or anything when I couldn't even trust my own judgment? Psychologists say that when trust is broken, the brain goes into survival mode. It shuts down curiosity, because curiosity requires safety. It's the same part of the brain that helps you learn languages. That's why heartbreak makes your English sound rusty, your memory foggy, and your motivation vanish. You're not lazy, you're hurt. Your brain is protecting you from more pain. In Denmark, it rains a lot. But that day, it felt like the sky was weeping for me. I walked for hours through Nyhavn, past the colorful houses that looked too cheerful for my mood. I remember thinking I'm done trying. With people. With English. With everything, but here's the strange part. Sometimes pain clears space for something new. That night, sitting alone in my small apartment, I played a slow English video, just to fill the silence. And for the first time I listened. Not to study, not to improve, just to feel connected to a human voice that didn't lie. That simple act, hearing someone speak clearly, kindly, was the beginning of something I didn't know yet. Rebuilding trust through sound. Because maybe after the storm, the first thing we must learn again is how to listen. Silence in a foreign land. When you live in a country where you don't speak the language, silence becomes your shadow. In Denmark, people are kind, but their words felt like music I couldn't dance to. I would stand in a bakery trying to order a piece of rye bread and freeze. My mouth open, but nothing came out. I felt invisible. The kind of invisible that doesn't make you mysterious. Just small. It's strange, isn't it? We humans are built for connection, yet language can turn into a wall. I remember sitting on a bus one winter morning. The seats were full, but the silence was louder than any noise. Everyone was scrolling, reading, whispering in Danish. I wanted to join, to say something, but all I had were English words trapped behind fear. Silence can be comforting for a while, but after weeks it becomes heavy. Presses on your chest like a weight. The lonelier I felt, the harder it became to speak English. Even though English was supposed to be my bridge to the world. My tongue stiffened. My confidence evaporated. I started avoiding conversations altogether, afraid of sounding stupid, afraid of being misunderstood. Neuroscientists have a name for this: language paralysis. When your brain links speaking with anxiety, it literally shuts down your speech centers. It's not because you can't talk. It's because you're protecting yourself from embarrassment, the same way your body flinches from a burn. In my case, it wasn't just fear of language, it was fear of being seen. But one afternoon, something shifted. A stranger at a cafe noticed my hesitation and said slowly with a warm smile, "It's okay, take your time." Just 5 words, but they broke the silence. For the first time, I felt understood, not judged. That moment reminded me, connection doesn't start with perfect grammar. It starts with courage. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would learn to speak again, not fluently, not perfectly, but honestly. Because sometimes the most powerful sound isn't your accent. It's your heart learning to make noise again. Relearning to listen. There's a funny thing about listening. You think it's passive, but it's actually an act of courage. After months of silence, I started small, 1 English video per day, played at half speed. No pressure, no notes, no study goals. I just wanted to hear how kindness sounded again. At first, my brain resisted. It would wander off mid-sentence, chasing random thoughts. But I kept going. I played short clips where people spoke slowly, clearly, naturally. Stories about travel, love, mistakes. The rhythm of the voices began to feel like breathing. I realized something profound. Listening wasn't about understanding every word. It was about staying present, even when you didn't. In psychology, they call this attentive listening. When you train your mind to stay open instead of reactive. It's the same skill that helps rebuild trust. Because when you truly listen to someone else or to yourself, you stop interrupting, stop defending, and start connecting. Some days I listen to English audiobooks while walking along Copenhagen's lakes. The Danish air was cold, but the voices in my headphones felt warm. I wasn't just learning English anymore. I was relearning intimacy with words, with emotions, with silence. Once I caught myself whispering along to a line in a podcast, "You can't heal what you refuse to hear." It hit me. Maybe my problem wasn't my accent or grammar. Maybe I had simply forgotten how to hear myself, so I made a new rule. No multitasking. When I listened fully, even to the mistakes, the pauses, the laughter. Slowly, English stopped feeling foreign. It became a friend that spoke gently, patiently, without judgment. Listening taught me the first step of rebuilding trust. In love and in language. Stay long enough to understand before you respond. Because healing, like learning, starts with attention. Talking to myself in English started as a joke. One morning while brushing my teeth, I looked in the mirror and said, "Good morning, you beautiful disaster." I laughed, but then I kept talking. First it felt ridiculous. My Danish neighbors probably thought I'd lost it. But that silly habit, talking to myself in English, became one of the most powerful ways I rebuilt confidence. You see, when you speak out loud, even to yourself, you're not just practicing pronunciation. You're retraining your brain to trust your own voice. After betrayal, your inner voice becomes suspicious. It whispers, "Don't speak, you'll sound stupid. Don't try, you'll fail again." Talking to myself became a quiet rebellion against that fear. Every day I'd pick a topic. The weather, my feelings, my plans. I'd describe them slowly in English. "It's raining again." I feel lazy but peaceful. Simple, honest sentences. At first, my words came out clumsy like shoes that didn't fit. But the more I talked, the smoother it felt. My brain began connecting English with safety instead of judgment. Linguists call this output training. It rewires the brain's language circuits by turning passive knowledge into active skill. But for me, it was more than science, it was therapy. I started to realize that when you speak with kindness, even in a foreign language, you start healing the relationship between your mind and your heart. One evening, I recorded myself talking for 2 minutes about forgiveness. When I listened back, my accent was imperfect, but my tone was steady. I sounded calm. That's when I knew I wasn't just learning English. I was learning how to trust myself again. So if you're afraid to speak, start small. Talk to yourself in English, not to impress anyone, but to remind yourself that your voice still matters. Because healing begins the moment you hear your own words and believe them. The science of trust and accent. Here's something fascinating. Your brain reacts to voices the same way it reacts to faces. When you hear a familiar accent, your brain releases oxytocin, the trust hormone. That's why hearing your native language feels comforting, like home. But when you hear a foreign accent, your brain hesitates. It quietly asks, "Is this safe?" When I first moved to Denmark, every voice around me sounded sharp, distant, like glass tapping against glass. Even English, my safe space, started to feel strange when spoken by people with different rhythms. But over time I realized something. If I wanted others to trust me, I first had to learn to trust their sounds. I began paying attention to music, not meaning. The ups and downs of Danish and English speech. I noticed how Danes spoke softly at the end of sentences, how Americans stretched their vowels like they were painting with air. And slowly I started to enjoy it. It was like learning a new melody. Here's where science kicks in. Studies show that mimicking accents, even slightly, can increase empathy. It's called the chameleon effect. When you subtly mirror someone's rhythm, your brains sync up. You literally start to feel each other more. So every time I practice speaking English with a Danish twist, or listened to a British podcast and copied the tone, I was building not just fluency but connection. Trust, it turns out, isn't only emotional, it's neurological. When you listen without judgment, your mirror neurons activate. They help you understand intention, not just words. That's how language becomes love, through shared rhythm, not shared grammar. One day, while chatting with a barista in English, I noticed she relaxed the moment I adjusted my tone to match hers. Her smile said, "I get you." That moment taught me more about communication than any grammar book ever could. Because accents don't divide us, fear does. And the moment you stop fearing how you sound, your voice begins to carry truth again. Rebuilding connection. There's something magical about speaking English in a country that doesn't. It's like standing on a small bridge between two worlds, shaky but full of possibility. For months, I had avoided small talk in cafes or supermarkets, terrified of stumbling over words. But one morning, while waiting for my coffee, I decided to try. I looked at the barista and said softly, "How's your day?" It was simple, but she smiled. "Pretty good. You?" And just like that, A 5-second exchange melted the ice that had been freezing my confidence for months. That small human connection built from imperfect English felt like sunlight after endless rain. You see, communication isn't about being flawless, it's about being present. The moment you look into someone's eyes and speak, even with mistakes, your brain registers safety. Dopamine flows, anxiety drops, learning accelerates. That's why psychologists say social interaction is the most natural language classroom in Denmark. I started volunteering at a local library, reading English books to kids. Their laughter, their curiosity, their endless why questions. All of it reminded me how language was never about performance. It was play. It was connection. And the more I connected, the more English came alive again. At night, I would record short reflections about my day, how I felt when I spoke, what words I forgot, what moments made me proud. Slowly, my voice recordings became proof of growth, not failure. Each one sounded clearer, warmer, more confident. Connection, I realized, isn't something you get back. It's something you rebuild word by word, moment by moment. Like trust. Like love. And maybe that's the secret no language app tells you. You don't learn English to sound native. You learn it to sound real. Because real words, even broken ones, can build bridges stronger than silence ever could. When words heal. It happened on one of those gray Danish afternoons when the air smells like rain and regret. I was sitting alone in a park, headphones on, listening to an English podcast about forgiveness. The speaker said, "Sometimes healing begins the moment you say what you were too afraid to say." And right there I paused the audio, because I knew exactly what that meant. And I took off my headphones and whispered in English, "I forgive you." Not to anyone in particular. Maybe to the person who hurt me. Maybe to myself. The words felt strange at first, heavy, then lighter. And as I repeated them, something inside me softened. That was the moment I realized language isn't just a tool for communication. It's medicine. Every word you speak carries energy. When you speak gently, your nervous system calms. When you speak honestly, your brain releases serotonin, the chemical of relief. Words can literally change your biology. From then on, I started treating English not as a subject but as therapy. I journaled in English every night, writing about confusion, gratitude, pain, and small wins. Some entries were messy, emotional, filled with grammar mistakes. But it didn't matter. Because every word I wrote was one stitch closer to healing. And then something beautiful happened. I started feeling English, not just understanding it. When I said thank you, it wasn't a phrase anymore, it was an emotion. When I said, I'm okay, it wasn't about fluency, it was about truth. A few weeks later, I met an old woman at a cafe who struck up a conversation in English. We talked for 15 minutes about books, family, and weather. When she stood up to leave, she said, "You speak beautifully, not perfectly, but sincerely." That sentence stayed with me longer than any compliment I'd ever received. Because maybe that's what fluency really means, not sounding native but sounding alive. Love after the storm. By the time spring returned to Copenhagen, I realized something incredible. I was no longer afraid of my own voice. I could walk into a cafe, greet a stranger in English, even make jokes. Not because my grammar was perfect, but because I had stopped measuring my worth by perfection. Love after the storm doesn't always look like romance. Sometimes it's rediscovering your courage, your rhythm, your ability to trust again. In words, in people, in yourself. For me, rebuilding trust began with sound. Every slow English sentence I practiced, every awkward conversation, every honest journal entry was a brick in the bridge that led me back to myself. Science says our brains are plastic, they can rewire, heal, and grow through repetition. But here's the truth no lab can quantify. Your heart can too. When you speak words of hope, when you listen without fear, when you forgive through language, you are teaching your heart to expand again. That's not just neuroscience. That's soul work. One day, I recorded a short video in English to send to my family. I talked about how much I had learned, not just the language but the lesson. My mom texted back, "You sound happier." That single line told me everything. Healing had found its way into my voice, so if you've been broken by love, by failure, by fear, and you're scared to start again, remember this. Trust grows like language. Slowly, softly, one honest word at a time. Because after every storm, there's always a new sound waiting to be heard. And it might just be your own voice.